Can't decide and torn between a romantic, comedy, action, or an indie film to watch for the weekend? Well. Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast is your ultimate guide to the latest movies. Join us as we dissect the latest on the blockbusters. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Movie Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Staci.
And I'm your co-host, Sarah. And
today we have a very special new guest, a new host here on the GSMC Podcast Network, Heidi. Say hi.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Today is your first day, yes?
Yes.
And today we're talking about movies, and the two movies are about the history of relationships, which I think is fun because these are both like very long, multiple years relationships, and this is our very new relationship with Heidi. So complete opposites, but very excited in both ways. So Heidi, feel free to join in as much as you like. So the first movie is The Hows of Us. This is a Filipino movie, which I did not know going into it.
So subtitles or?
Well, and it's very interesting about that because when it starts talking, there's a sort of voiceover and you're seeing a picture, but you don't see people talking. But you do immediately get subtitles, even though the first things they say seem to be in English. So I'm like, why are you giving me subtitles? You're saying exactly is this like for people who are hard of hearing showing? Because
did you watch this one in the theater or at home?
Yes, in the theater.
Okay.
So I was like, maybe it's just that this is a very special showing also for people who just, are hard of hearing, and I don't know. And then they start switching into Spanish, and I'm like, oh, okay, got it. You're just throwing in English, and then you throw in Spanish. And then they start switching into something, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. Because I only vaguely recognize the Spanish from the 3 years of Spanish that I don't remember at all from high school. But I can kind of recognize the sounds, and the other ones, I'm like, what? So within 5 minutes, I realized, I think this is Filipino. Again, I didn't know that going in. I only knew the basic gist was that this was a couple who was looking back at their relationship and, trying to determine if they wanted to go on or whatever. Somehow completely did not hear that this was like a huge Filipino hit with a very popular Filipino movie couple.
Oh, what made you choose it?
The description of it, of the history of a relationship. I was like, oh, that sounds like it might be interesting. And I don't even know how I saw it. I just was looking at what's out this week, and there it was. So I love the fact that this film goes between English and Spanish and Filipino, because I really want to speak a foreign language like that fluently and can't get there. And it's just like, even within sentences, they'll like start in English and then in the middle of a sentence change to something else. So it'll be like, promise me that you'll always something in foreign language. I'm just like, I love you. This is like my language fluency dreams come to life. It's like, why am I not this fluent? And why do I not live in a country that forces me to be this fluent?
I know. I've always wanted to be multilingual. I mean, my one grandmother grew up speaking Norwegian and my one grandfather grew up speaking German, but it was, around World War II, and that was all kind of frowned upon. Yeah. So they spoke it at home, but then they didn't speak it and they didn't remember much of it after childhood. So sadness. Not trilingual.
See, and I don't have any of that because nobody in my family speaks any other language. And my sister and I both took Spanish in high school, but then we didn't speak it at home to each other because it was like, no. So it's like...
It would mean you have to speak to your sister.
Exactly, that was why. It was like, I don't speak to you that much in English. We're not doing this in Spanish. So then it was just like, I took 3 years and I can say like 20 words. Great. That was totally 3 years worth it. Absolutely. What about you, Heidi? Do you have any language experience?
I'm similar. I also took Spanish, and so I know, about 20 words. Right. Can only speak in the present.
I took French, and I maybe know about 20 words in Spanish, just from various
You took French
stuff. Yeah. No, but I know more words in French than 20, but I maybe know 20 words in Spanish from various experiences in life. We went on our honeymoon in Mexico, so there were a few words I picked up, but
right. So we are actually going to take a short break right now. Stay tuned.
The average sedan is built with a steel frame and equipped with 6 airbags. Remember this the next time you see someone walking. Drivers, be aware. Pedestrians don't have armor. A message from the California Office of Traffic Safety. The average SUV has 2 blind spots, weighs between 4 and 6,000 pounds, and takes about 6 seconds to stop. Remember this the next time you're on foot. Pay attention, people. Pedestrians don't have armor. A message from the California Office of Traffic Safety.
Welcome back to the GSMC Movie Podcast, where today we are talking about the Filipino film, The Hows of Us. In this film, the girl's name is actually George, which completely threw me off because in the opening voiceover, you hear sort of clips that will later come up in the film. So it's sort of like a, not a montage because it's only vocal, but like a montage of different parts of the film that will later be important, but you don't yet know why. And at one point, Primo, who's the male, is making a promise of, I promise to take care of you and this house and George. And so I'm thinking like George is their son or something because I haven't seen anybody yet. And so it throws me off for the first like 10 minutes when they keep talking about George. And I'm like, is that the girl? Who's George? Yes, the girl's name is George, which just continues this whole thing of, why have I never been to the Philippines? Like, my family's Air Force and my mother spent several years as a child in the Philippines. And I'm just like, I don't speak a language and I didn't get to travel. And just, Mom, what the heck? I'm very upset.
Now, is George short for Georgina or Georgia or anything like that?
I think it's just George.
Cool.
Nobody ever calls, Primo at one point shortens it to Joe, but nobody else ever calls her anything but George.
Is that common in the Philippines? Is George a common name for a girl?
I'm not sure. I'm not surprised too much that it would be like, oh, we're just going to, irregardless of gender names. I'm like, okay, fine. But yeah, I was very shocked. And then there's also a couple of times where the person who leaves them the house is Tita Lola. And my very little limited part of Spanish made me think that was their aunt because Tita and Tia, but it's actually their grandmother. So I'm not sure about like even family names there. It later came out in the credits that the mother's name is Baby something. And so I was like, what baby? Where was the baby? I didn't see any baby in this film. And had to figure it out like by context. Oh, that's George's mom. Okay, I have no idea about any of the names in the Philippines, but this whole thing is very interesting. So Primo is a musician who cares very much about OPM, which I'm not quite sure what the letters stand for, but it's Filipino music. He doesn't want to perform any foreign music. He only wants to perform Filipino music and bring it to the world. And he's one of those artists. There's a line he even has of like, I'd rather starve than do something I don't want to do or something like that. It's like, keep the art pure sort of person. George is studying to be a doctor and they get into a relationship. And while Primo's struggling with his music, George keeps making sacrifices for him to the point where they eventually break up. And we actually start the film with them in the house after the breakup. They've evidently been broken up for about 2 years, but Primo has come back. He's been away, and he comes back to the house where George is, and they get into a fight because George wants to sell the house and Primo doesn't. He kind of wants to get their relationship back together, and she's like, I already did several years with you. I'm over this. We're done. I'm not doing this mistake anymore. But, of course, it is, a rom-com, so that's probably not going to work out very well. So it was very interesting, along with the names of getting the different relationships with people.
Original Filipino music.
Oh, it is? Okay, I thought it must stand for that, but I was like...
Heidi, I'm the one that looks stuff up.
She is.
Good to know.
She looks stuff up and she pronounces all the scientific words I can't say.
Is OPM like folk music?
It just says, I'd have to click on that. I just got
I think it's like...
It's a genre of contemporary Philippine music.
Oh, okay.
So it's contemporary.
But not like drawn too much. It's not, a regular American pop song just in Filipino. That he is, especially at one point, he actually has a job performing at like a bar or whatever, and the customers give him requests of songs they want, and he says, well, I won't perform songs in English. I only want to perform either OPM or songs by Filipino artists.
It originally referred only to Philippine pop songs, particularly ballads. And looked like between the 1950s, 1960s, and before the 1970s, then that goes on into a whole long thing that I'm not going to read to you from the internet, but
yes,
been around for a while.
So then there's also this sort of, it's not a side story, it's like a second part to George's backstory, is that Tita Lola had diabetes and she died and left the house, and George's younger brother has diabetes and hasn't been taking care of himself, and they have had this long-running goal as a family to go to Amsterdam, where their father is. And I know from different things I've heard that that's, I won't say common, but that's not uncommon in some Asian countries to have, you know, a foreign father, because a lot of particularly Europeans go to Asian countries and they go there pretty regularly. So it's like my quote unquote foreign family. And so part of the goal is now, especially because her brother's ill, they want to go to Amsterdam before anything else can happen, but they have to sell the house, which George wants to sell and Primo doesn't. And I feel...
Wait, George wants to sell that? Wait, Primo doesn't... Primo's the boyfriend, right?
Primo is the boyfriend.
But it's not his house.
It was left to the both of them.
Oh.
By Tita Lola. That's where we get his promise of, I promise to take care of you and the house and George.
I apologize if I missed that.
Yes. So this feels, I don't think it was like drawn from the same material, but this feels a bit like the breakup, because at one point George does actually take duct tape and put it down the center of the house the whole way. So there's this argument of, this is your side and this is my side.
What if your side doesn't have a bathroom?
Well, they actually have to create a schedule for the bathroom.
Oh,
jeez.
jeez.
I see a shot of it. I'm like, I don't think that schedule should work, because there's one part where it's like, your hours are 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. I was like, so you can't go into the bathroom for whole sets of hours? I don't understand what's going on there. But then there's all of their friends. Primo comes back and meets his former bandmates, and George has her medical friends, including people she knew from high school, who are, some of them trying to get them back together, and other ones just being fun comic relief who, you know, are there to make jokes whether or not you get back together. So it was very fun. It felt quite a bit for me like a Korean drama. It had a sort of like, especially with the more intimate parts of the relationship, I wasn't actually sure for most of the film if they had actually gotten married at some point, because they're in the house together. And then later it comes out that no, they haven't, because someone who comes to look at the house says, oh, your husband and your wife or whatever. And Primo's very happy because that guy thinks they were married. And George is just very frustrated with him, because she's like, I'm trying to sell this house. Shut up.
Oh, jeez.
So they have to come to a lot of agreement. There's a lot of, fun tension, but it's not sexual tension. There's nothing too adult in this, and even when you get to the sort of like kissing or whatever, it feels very still innocent, even like when they finally do get to the what's supposed to be the like big kiss scene. I'm just like, okay, this is one of those things like with Korean dramas, like you don't get to this till like episode 12 out of 16, but in an American show you would have done this in like the first 20 minutes and it would have been like a French kiss and it would have progressed to that. So I know this is supposed to be like the big, oh, I'm so happy moment, but I'm just like, this feels very innocent for a film where you've been together for 7 years, and it's not clear if those 7 years are including the 2 years where Primo was away, or they were together for 7 years and then Primo went away. So I'm not sure if it's been 7 years or 2 years. Either way, they both look really young for whatever age they're supposed to be in the modern day. I'm like, you clearly graduated either high school or college, and it's been multiple years since then, but I can, especially with Primo, very easily believe that you're still like 17. So I'm having a hard time believing you're supposed to be like some 20-something who's had this whole life change and now wants to get his
This is the opposite of the movie we talked about a couple weeks ago, where the cast was all supposed to be in high school and the actors were all 30.
Right. Yeah. It's like, you're supposed to be probably in your late 20s here, and I'm having a hard time with it. With George, it's a bit easier because at times they put her in stronger makeup. But then when they put her in more natural makeup, I'm back to, I could easily believe you're like a teenager still. You're definitely supposed to be in your 20s, right? Like, how old are you supposed to be? How many years has it been? The timing of this film is a bit confusing because they do jump back and forth. And you can only kind of really tell that at times from the way George is made to look with her hair and makeup. And then at other times, just based off what they're talking about, because as you go through the past, you do get to see of how they broke up and why. And then with the present, it's all, okay, Primo's trying to get George back, and George is trying to not be gotten back. She clearly still has feelings for him, but she's trying to fight that because she doesn't want to be made a fool of again.
So the actors, the woman who plays George is 22, and the man who plays Primo is 23.
See?
So
yeah.
they're pretty young.
But if it's supposed to be 7 years at least from, at minimum, high school, that would put them in their mid to late 20s. And I'm just like, and I think it's supposed to be college, because I don't know how the education system is in the Philippines, but George is supposed to be studying to be a doctor. And one of her friends who was in school with her is already a doctor, which in America at least is like minimum 7 years of school. So I'm like, how old are you? I don't buy this. And if you're my doctor, I kind of want to see your medical license because you look awfully young. Are you sure you're out of school? So yeah, the timing throws me off a little. Where are we? Are we in the present? Are we in the past? The language doesn't throw me off too much because from moment one, they give you the subtitles. So it's like, even if you are jumping around and I understood what you were saying for the first 3 words of that sentence and then you changed to a different language, I have the subtitles the whole time so I can follow it. I liked it. It was cute. The actors are evidently very popular in the Philippines. They've made a film before together that was very popular. So this is sort of like, I don't even know what the modern day equivalent of a power couple would be for film here. Do we have one anymore?
Can't think of one off the top of my head. I'm sure we maybe do, but I don't know.
It would be like, you know,
like a former like Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt.
Right. Or like, you know, because I tend to like musicals. I was going back to like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers on like their second film together, but you know, without musicals. This is not a musical, even though Primo is a musician. We only see him sing, I think, maybe like 1.5 times. I think you get one full song and then you get him singing another song, but it's really just sort of as like background music while someone's telling George something about him that she didn't know previously that of course changes her mind. So it's just like, okay, I thought it was very cute. I could see why it would be popular. I kind of really now want to go to the Philippines just because it's like, is everyone that fluent in multiple languages? I want to pick up and move there for like 5 years. Like, I also want to be able to just fluently jump from A to B to C to A again in language speaking, and why don't we do that here? I'm still very frustrated about my monolingual state, even though I've now tried to study 3 different languages. Fail. So we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned.
The average sedan is built with a steel frame and equipped with 6 airbags. Remember this the next time you see someone walking. Drivers, be aware. Pedestrians don't have armor. A message from the California Office of Traffic Safety. The average SUV has 2 blind spots, weighs between 4,000 and 6,000 pounds, and takes about 6 seconds to stop. Remember this the next time you're on foot. Pay attention, people. Pedestrians don't have armor. A message from the California Office of Traffic Safety.
Welcome back to GSMC Movie Podcast. Our second film today on this History of Relationships episode is One Day, and this is actually based off of a book, and it stars Anne Hathaway and Jim Sturgis as 2 British students, and it covers their relationship from about 1988 to 2011, and the premise of it is theoretically it's only covering this one specific day each year, July 15th, which is evidently St. Swithin's Day. I have no idea what that is, because that's not a holiday I've ever heard of. But B, because of that, and because both Anne Hathaway and Jim Sturgis are supposed to be British in this, I couldn't even quite understand what he was saying. So I was just like, some Saint Day and July 15th. Yeah, got it. Moving on. So Anne Hathaway is also supposed to be British. I think she's supposed to be Scottish. At one point, she talks about her parents' house in Edinburgh. Her accent is not the greatest. I love Anne Hathaway, but I'm just like, why are you, no, and this accent. And then at times it sounds almost like you just completely slipped back into the American accent. So why do you have to be British, other than, I assume both characters are British in the book? That's the only thing I've got for that. It's like, why are you British?
It's been a long time since I saw this movie, so I'm trying to remember if her accent bothered me. It probably did. I can always tell when they slip back into an American accent.
Mm-hmm. Well, and she just feels like it's not, obviously it's not natural for her, but it doesn't even come easy for her. It's something she kind of has to think about, it seems like, as she's acting. So I'm just like, you couldn't have just made like a slight change where you were like, an exchange student or something. Except that would then, she has to be in Britain for the rest of the book because they have to be close to each other, at least on each of these days. So you do get a sort of, not a caption, it just sort of shows up in the picture of what year it is. And it actually starts in 2006, but we don't quite see what happens. And then you jump back to 1988, which is where they first met. It was after they graduated. They've evidently clearly been out partying and drinking all night. Their friends hook up or something. And so they happen to meet each other that way. And he goes back to her house. And then you carry on through the years as you see them. She clearly very much likes him. He's more of a sort of well-to-do playboy. And he just almost never makes any good choices. In this movie, there's a lot of things where I'm just like, why is she still friends with you? Because you do even later get a character saying, she made you decent and you made her happy. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's a fair trade-off. It's like, he's just kind of bad the whole film. And why is it, you made her happy, so that allows you to be a terrible human being? What? But you don't hate him. You just are like, get your life together, you spoiled boy, you.
Yeah.
But the problem I have with the year skipping is you do get the wording on the screen, although they do seem to skip a couple of years. I have no clue why. I'm not sure if that's a thing in the book or if the book actually covers those years. But then you don't get the same amount of time for each year, which is kind of frustrating, to the point that there was one where I was like, wait, did I miss something? Did I miss the part where this year came in at first? And so it's been longer than I thought it was. I was like, that was like 2 minutes, and now we're on to the next year. What the heck is going on here? It can be a little confusing. And the movie is not trying to specifically lay things out for you. It definitely does give you a lot that will then later come up. There are a number of things where it's only later that you realize sort of their either importance or the irony that is life about them. Anne Hathaway has a couple of lines in the early years that, if she remembered them, would definitely come back to bite her in later years. And that's cool. But when it's like within the year, I'm like, what year is this? Where are we? How long have you known each other? And how did you get here? Because especially from the first year to the second year, I'm like, why are you meeting up a year later? Because it didn't even seem like you were friends when we left off in that first year. How did you get this relationship?
And why St. Swithin's Day? I'm looking it up right now, and it's July 15th, and I have no idea. I mean,
it's the day they graduated, I guess.
He was a bishop of Winchester in the 9th century. You okay?
Yeah.
I don't know.
A common holiday for people to celebrate?
And I'm not seeing that. I mean, it's not like, Valentine's Day or something that has a saint associated with it. It's...
Yeah, he gives a reason about, St. Swithin's Day and why it would be something that people their age would know, and I just couldn't understand his accent at the time to really understand what he was saying. Because, again, I was like, it's St. What Day now? What are you talking about?
I wonder if the book explains that more.
Well, I feel like the book must explain a number of things more. Because and again, it doesn't lay everything out. So there's a point where you get to things where they're referring to things that have happened, and it's like, oh, so wait, it's not like the way I understood the synopsis was that they like somehow met and made a pact of like, whatever we're doing will be together on this day each year. That's not what happens. It's just as if like you manage to jump into their lives randomly on each day. So clearly there's stuff that's happening in between, and they refer to that, but we don't get to see it because it's not on St. Swithin's Day, so whatever. And I'm just like, so what happened between, like 93 and 94 or whatever? Like, how did we get here? I'm confused. You're not helping me, movie. And
right.
It's just like, I'm a little frustrated because, again, I like Anne Hathaway and I kind of want to like her. I like her in this film, but I'm also very frustrated with her relationship with Jim Sturgis of A, why don't you just tell him you like him? Because there's that whole, I don't want to ruin our friendship or whatever thing. But then B, why are you... They're very close. And this film made me think quite a bit, actually, of When Harry Met Sally, which did that same sort of thing. Because when they first start off, you know, they're not friends, and it's,
Right.
they both graduated at high school. But when Harry Met Sally...
College.
Sorry, yes, college. When Harry Met Sally definitely jumps a few years before you even get the second and third meeting, and then you get them very close together. With this one, it's every year, but they seem to have been friends the whole time. I think, again, there's a lot in the middle that we don't get because it's not on that specific day, so I'm not sure. But they do seem to have been pretty solid friends since 88. So by the time you get into the mid-90s, they're very close, and it's that, like, thing where when in Harry Met Sally, he talks about, you know, all the stuff he can talk about with Sally that he can't talk about with anybody else.
Right.
They have that relationship where they'll even talk about, like, their other relationships, their actual romantic relationships with each other, which of course then makes the people in those romantic relationships a little weird, because like that's a person of the opposite sex you're talking to, and yet you're not having that whole thing about, like, can men and women just be friends, sort of. In which the answer for both of these movies is evidently no. Dang it. It's just like, but why? So I do actually find the other relationships in this almost more interesting. Anne Hathaway's, her character's name is Emma, and she's evidently, it comes up very times that she's very smart and funny, but we don't see that too much. People just tell us that. And then she later writes a book, and you see a kid reading it and giggling on a train. So it's like, I'll just take your word that she's funny.
But she doesn't really come across as funny in the movie, does she?
She comes across as a little witty at times.
I don't remember thinking, dang, she's a funny character.
No, I didn't think that either, but I thought it was a sort of, you're highly educated and you can kind of, you know, be sarcastic about yourself. Isn't that just most 20-somethings? But whatever. Supposedly you're very witty and funny and a good writer. I'll just take your word for it. And then Jim Sturgis's Dexter, which I also had a problem even learning his name at first, because they all sort of called him Dex, but with that strange accent that Anne Hathaway probably shouldn't be doing. So I'm like, what are you saying? What is his name? I'm not quite sure. You don't start with Dexter, you start with Dex. I'm like, what are you saying? And then it's later when we get someone saying Dexter, I'm like, oh, is that what you... Okay, got it. So Emma ends up in a relationship with Ian, who is just sort of awkward, and he's supposed to be a stand-up comedian, but he's not funny at all. And I'm not even sure why that relationship happens, because it's just like, I don't get why she's with you. I don't get why she went out on a date with you. It's just like, is this a pity dating? What is going on here? They meet at a restaurant they both work at that she calls like the Graveyard of Ambition or something. So it's like commiserating of misery, or we both hate our jobs, let's go out on a date. I don't know. Dexter ends up with Sylvie, who is also from a wealthy family, and they end up having a kid together, but then that relationship doesn't work out. And I'm like, in both cases, I am much more interested in what's going on with this not necessarily normal actual romantic relationship than with this, I know because this is this type of movie, you're going to end up together, Dexter-Emma relationship. I'm like, can I fast forward through a few years? Is there a way to like skip years to get to wherever you end up together? Because I know we're getting there, and I just kind of don't care about all this ridiculous angst that you're going through in the middle when Dexter starts becoming a major jerk because he's on television, and I'm just like, oh, I don't care.
Now the book covers 20 years.
Oh,
so
okay.
Does the movie cover that much space? And if
88
so,
to 2011.
how are they? Yeah, that would be
20
years. So how do they do with making them go from 20 something to 40 something?
Better with Jim Sturgis's Dexter, because they actually do in later years, you know, give him gray hair and gray facial hair. Anne Hathaway looks like 20-something the whole time, to the point that I completely forgot that she was supposed to be, like, you know, in her 40s when we get to the later years, because I was like, you're just, like, 25 throughout this whole thing, right? Oh, you're supposed to... What? I'm sorry. I completely missed that, even though I've been seeing the years I took to actually, like, creating a little header for each year as I was writing those. I was like, okay, 98. What's happening in 98? So I can keep track of this, because I'm still confused. Yeah, when we get to later years, even though it's like, okay, she does her almost like her same Princess Diaries thing with her hair, where when we get there, she's considered not too attractive because she's got the curly hair and glasses. And then as we go on, she gets more chic. She loses the glasses, though I don't know if her hairstylist broke them. And then she gets straighter hair. I'm just like, I'm very upset, at what you're saying about curly hair here. But okay, fine, I get that. She's becoming more, like, comfortable with herself. But she still looks 20-something, so... Right. That doesn't help me when they finally get together, it's like 2006 or so. So that's supposed to be like
forever.
18 years later. I'm like, and if you were 22 or so when you graduated, you don't get together till you're 40. You do not look 40 in any way. I'm sorry. That just does not work whatsoever.
Random side note. Shocking, I know. Jodie Whittaker is in this movie, the new Doctor Who. I just wanted to throw that out.
Sylvie.
Tilly. You said Sylvie, and I was hoping she played, not hoping, but I looked to see if she played Sylvie, but Tilly.
Okay. Well, that would explain why, because you don't really see too much of Tilly unless she's like kissing a guy or about to get married.
Yeah.
So that would explain why I didn't really notice her. But yeah. So I don't know. I wanted to like this because based on a book, so I'm always like, ooh, I hope they did this well. I feel the book might actually be very interesting to read because this does seem like an interesting story and an interesting way to tell a story of, okay, we're jumping to each day on this year, even though for some of the years it seems like you're actually covering more than one day. And I don't know if they do that in the book as well, or if the movie just felt the need to be like, oh, this is a really important part, so we have to cover the day and then the night and then the next day. There's one that actually almost seems like 3 days, but I can't quite tell the length of time. So I'm just like, I don't know always what year we're in, and I'm not even sure within that year how long it's been since we got to this year. The way they tell the timing of this doesn't quite work, which I think would be better in a book where you have like, I hope you have a chapter of all 1 year. So this is, this chapter is this whole year of everything.
I think when I was reading about the book a few minutes ago, I think it did say each chapter is a year, that July 15th on the next year.
So it sounds like it would be a really interesting book, and I could see why someone would then want to take that book and try and make it as a movie, but it really just doesn't work as a movie, and it made me more than anything want to go then watch When Harry Met Sally, because that's a movie dealing with essentially the same thing of men and women being friends, and then of course not being friends over a 15 or 20 year period.
Okay.
So, yes.
Well, all right. Good to know. And maybe we'll have to read the book.
Well, yeah. But this is not the book podcast, so.
No.
Thank you for listening to the GSMC Movie Podcast. We will see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Movie Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.